All right, welcome in everyone to Pub's first May meeting. Just want to get everything set up. As a reminder, this is a meeting of community volunteers tasked to advise council on items related to the Water Bureau and the Bureau of Environmental Services. Under Portland City Code and state law, the Portland Utility Board is holding this meeting electronically. Board members and relevant city staff are attending remotely, electronically, or by phone, and the city has made it available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting is being recorded, and the public will have the opportunity to provide comments during the public comment portion of the agenda. And you can also provide written testimony to the board by emailing us at utilityboard@portlandoregon.gov. All right, so Pub believes and acts upon anti-racist principles. In our meeting spaces and interactions with Pub, while every person has the right to share their personal perspective, we stand against wrongful conduct, particularly any conduct that is targeted towards people that are made vulnerable by systemic inequities. And this means stepping up as a community when there is wrongful conduct and fostering a space for learning and growth. All right, and that means speaking up and speaking out. Each person on this board is empowered to maintain the culture of the Portland Utility Board, and we want to focus on the impacted individual or population and condemn the conduct, not the person.
Thank you, Robin. My name is Amy Archer-Masters, and I'll quickly run through the meeting guidelines. Please state your name before you speak, and if appropriate, the name of the person you're addressing or that you're addressing the group. The chat box is only viewable by the hosts, which includes myself. Please limit any chats to technical and logistical issues, including signing up for public comment, asking for technical assistance, or reminding us if you've been waiting to speak and haven't been called on. The raise hand function is primarily used by the board. The co-host may lower your hand once you've begun speaking just to maintain the flow of the conversation. During public comment periods, the public can also raise their hand and you'll be called on when appropriate. If you're connecting by phone, press *9 to raise your hand. Videos may be turned on if desired. It's not required. Please mute your microphone when not speaking. Members of the public will typically be muted except when giving public comment. If using a phone, please press *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Public comment is taken early in the meeting during the public comment period. You can sign up through chat with me or raise your hand during the comment period. It's also available just prior to any formal board vote after a motion has been made and seconded by board members. The meeting is being recorded. I'll pass it back to you, Robin.
All right, so there are two topics for today. First, we will continue with some final pieces of our budget work and decide if there's any next steps to pursue. And then we're gonna have a board discussion about kind of what government change means for our board, what the transition is gonna be like, and what kind of priorities we want our scope of work to be in these upcoming years and as we navigate recruitment. So let's start with disclosure of communication. If anyone wants to raise their hand, they can do so now. Go ahead, Tom.
This past Sunday afternoon, I communicated with the BES spill and pollution response group. I was out on Swan Island actually looking at compacted gravel lots that I was working on relative to the rate study, and I saw a pretty big spill out there that was not active, but I called the number, got a really good response from the people at the other end, and I hope they're taking care of it. But it is something that if you don't know the number, it's 823-7180, and if you ever see something, call BES and let them know. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. Go ahead, Teresa.
Yeah, I have been involved in the regional habitat connectivity work groups. process and have been in close communication with one of the BES staff for this project. And that's about it.
All right, last call for any other disclosures. All right, now on to public comment. Amy, have we received any
I have not
requests?
received any requests in advance.
And are there any public commenters today in our meeting that would like to raise their hand now for a moment at the podium? All right, I'm not seeing any, so we can continue on. Let's give ourselves a minute or two just to review the last board meeting minutes. Did anyone see anything that needed to be adjusted on the last minutes? Go ahead, Tom.
I just wanted to say, for those who remember, I did not attend the last meeting, so I listened to the recording, and in listening to the recording, of course, the major item was the rate study, and I just wanted to mention that my observations of some of the things that are being proposed in the rate study are, well, I guess I'm going to work on some ideas and some items to bring back to the board, because I feel that we could look at some of these and perhaps make suggestions about ways to improve what they've proposed. And so I just wanted to let everybody know that. And the other thing I noticed that Amy does a great job of capturing almost everything that people say. But again, it's kind of a reminder to me that the minutes are not verbatim. And I did hear some things from BES that were not recorded in the notes. And some of them I thought were quite pertinent to keep in mind as we go forward. That's it. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. And all right, so Tom, if you see anything that you did want to still edit, I would say send through those recommendations to Amy. Does anyone else have any notes before we go ahead with approving the current minutes? All right, let's go ahead and accept the meeting minutes for April 20th. All right, so the first portion of our conversation today is just that we're nearing the end of the budget cycle. We've been really in it, and we're waiting for the mayor's proposed decisions to come about in a couple of days. And there is a budget hearing we're expecting May 17th, and also a utility rate hearing, which if Amy could correct me, I believe that is the one that we are trying to figure out if we want to engage with, if we have any final statements that we have that we didn't say in our budget letters. This is an opportunity for us to engage if we so choose. If not, we don't have to. But
That's
go ahead,
correct.
Amy.
Yep, that's the part of the main decision for today, which is a little challenging since the mayor's proposed decisions aren't released publicly yet, but I will send those out to you as soon as they are released. And there are, potentially things that do have impacts on the rates. I did just want to flag, and I mentioned this to the co-chairs, that this time of year, depending on the type of year, a lot can happen towards the very end of the budget cycle. I know that the Development Review Advisory Committee I understand, has made some recommendations about waiving or suspending collection of SDCs, the service development charges. And I know that those are, a sizable chunk of the utility bureau's budgets, because For some bureaus like parks, it pays for things that are going to be developed in the future. For utility bureaus, it's paying for some substantial work that's already been done, like the big pipe work and some of the debt recovery. So there may be some things that if they were to move forward, and we don't know yet whether they will or not, but if they were, they could have a significant impact on rates. So I just wanted to flag that since it's something that is still a moving piece, but at this time of year, a lot can happen in between meetings. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
And I had messaged Amy and Karen, the other co-chair, wondering if it had come up in the first April meeting, I believe, that like if Pub wanted to decide if we wanted to give a formal opinion on yes, we wanted the budget, or no, we didn't want the budget. I was trying to navigate if this would be a time if we did want to make a formal decision on that. This might be a space to engage. I also, Amy can chime in on that, but I was going to say, personally, my opinion, I would definitely like to hear what the mayor says in a couple of days and kind of work with it rather than finalizing before that final information comes out. But go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, certainly you have touched on the aspects of the programs that are impacted by the rate increase, and that in absence of a rate increase, that maybe wouldn't be funded. And so in your letters, you have spoken to that, but you have not, come out definitively either saying, yes, we support this rate increase, or no, we are opposed to the rate increase. So that is a decision that if the majority of the board was in agreement and wanted to take a position, that you could certainly do that at this phase of the budget. As well as anything else that, hasn't been kind of made its way fully through to either full support or concern or opposition. So you can either highlight things, as I've put on the slide, highlight things that you think are really important to make sure are communicated, or provide new testimony on whatever you as a group decide to collectively say. And in some years, you've opted not to provide additional testimony because there hasn't been anything new or anything that you wanted to highlight beyond, what was just put in the letters or the prior testimony. You will have one more meeting before the rate hearing, but it's pretty close. It's just, you'll have a meeting on Thursday and the rate hearing is at the beginning of the next week. So you'll need to make decisions pretty quickly at the next meeting if there's anything new that you're wanting to testify about.
All right, well, the floor is open for any Pub members to chime in on how they're feeling. Does our engagement with the budget feel resolved? Is there anything left that we want to add to it? Is it necessary for us to be at this meeting, and can it further our potency as a board? Go ahead, Tom.
I can wait if somebody else has anything they'd like to say. I don't want to, but it looks like nobody else has raised their hand. I would just like to offer my thoughts, which, as you may recall, when we had the vote, I was the only one that voted no. I didn't really vote no to everything, but there were a couple things on in our letter that I thought could be different. And so I'll just mention those again and see if anybody else wants to potentially look at how we might address them, or we already voted. So maybe everybody would just say, no, Tom, that's done. But I'll say them again. So the sale of the land, the Tryon Creek treatment plant to the city of Lake Oswego for $1. I do not agree with that. I think the city of Portland's getting a bum deal. I do not agree with the rationale given by BES that a burden off of our shoulders, so to speak, and that Lake Oswego's taking it. Lake Oswego's taking 12 acres of riverfront property that ultimately they're going to come out looking really good in the end. So I think we should say to City Council that that should be renegotiated. And then the other thing I suggested is that we recommend that the automated meters be the implementation of that be delayed until we get through all of these big capital improvement projects that both bureaus have, and try and spread the cost out rather than adding it to the enormous costs that we are already dealing with right now. And I know there's lots of reasons to do AMI. I'm not opposed to AMI. I'm just opposed to the timing. And so I'm hoping that you all will reconsider that and that we would bring those two issues to City Council or this rate meeting. And that's my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, for your input. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, on the Lake Oswego issue, my initial take on it was probably, water under the bridge. And I looked into it a little bit and I wasn't that concerned. I think thanks to Tom's continued bringing it up and calling me, I finally went back and really dug down deep on it and put up all the documents I could find and various other things. And it really did actually leave me with a huge number of questions. It feels like a very, very strange and
I lost Bob for a second. Did anyone else?
I also lost him. It sounded he was like mid sentence.
Yeah, I
am I
lost.
still here? Am I gone?
Oh,
We can hear you
came
now.
back. You came back.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what happened there. And anyways, I would support adding in a line or a section saying that we would encourage the city council to take another look at that. I think it raises a lot of questions. So I appreciate Tom continuing to bang that drum.
Looks like we got a thumbs up from Julia. Good to hear. How do people feel about do we want to make it tentative? Like, are we interested in hearing what the mayor has to say in the upcoming days before we give an opinion? Or do we just want to, we just see it's very valuable that we're at this budget meeting because we are pub and that we should say at least one or two, three things, no matter what the outcome of his report is? Go ahead, Julia.
Yeah, I missed the very beginning of this meeting, so I'm not exactly sure I'm operating with the full amount of context here. Are we talking about a presentation at a city council meeting where we talk about the budget? Like, what is it? What is exactly the context? I apologize, but I was late, so I'm not exactly sure what's on the table here.
I just know that the meeting that we're talking about presenting at or having a couple moments or a few words is our utility rate hearing that's coming up. So I don't think it's specifically all of city council, but I imagine that the mayor and or our commissioner Maps would be there.
It is the full city council hearing, the utility rate hearing. So it's for all of the utilities.
Okay, I think
go ahead,
if
Julia.
that, I think, I mean, I mean, to the degree that we know what you want to say, I think it's always good to have a presence in places like that coming from a place of solid values. But I just don't know. Yeah, we'd have to prepare and know exactly what, yeah, I think it's good for us to show up to things like that and have a voice, but I'm not exactly sure what we should be saying.
I at least would have, if we don't say anything, I at least see a value in having at least one or two volunteers just go to the meeting and listen, and that way we could at least hear what's happening. And so like if we actively engage and it's meaningful and it helps the community voice be louder in the space, then we should definitely say something. If we're saying the exact same thing, I personally don't know if I would agree with saying it again, just because we did a little bit of repeating in our second budget letter. But I definitely see value, at least these important meetings, if we're not saying something, I think it's important that we at least have someone there to give us a little bit of feedback. Go ahead, Lorraine.
Thanks, Robin. I am a little bit confused about it because I just wanted to go back. I know that Tom and Bob spoke about the Cryon, is it? The Cryon riverfront property. And I thought we were going to like just listen, get feedback on that first before we move on to if we want to attend the meeting. So I just wanted to clarify because it seems like that was left hanging without board members able to see, hey, no, we're done with that, Tom, or you continue to raise good points and we need to support it. That's where I'm at right now in the meeting. I'm still there.
I was gonna say maybe Amy could help us out. Maybe Tom could. Go ahead, Tom, if you think that you could respond to that.
Yeah, since I brought something up and Bob made his comments about it, then I guess the next question is, should a motion be made to talk about this issue, and then, or maybe not even a motion, but should we talk about this issue, see if we have consensus by the group, and then perhaps vote on it? That is this particular item something that we should bring to the attention of City Council? Is I think where we're at. So I'm making that suggestion that we do that. We could talk about it, see if everybody agrees or not. If we don't agree, then this item would not be brought forward. Personally, I don't think we have to go to City Council and reiterate everything that especially Lorraine and Karen did a really good job at the last meeting. So I think if we have something new, so to me, this would be something new. Dear City Council, this is something we looked at and it's come to our attention. We've thought about it more and we want to bring it to your attention. And here's what we think, that whatever we decide to say, perhaps something like that this particular item in the agreement with the city of Lake Oswego, we believe should be revisited because it doesn't sound like Portland's getting a good deal, or however we phrase it in, of course, the most politically appropriate way. But it would be something like that, and to have the negotiators go back to the table, or at least talk about going back to the table, or however they work that out. But that would be our input, that we're concerned about it, however we say it. And so
Okay. I don't know if I heard Lorraine correctly, but I think that she asked also, like, you had some questions, Tom, and they were submitted. Did we ever get answers on those like submitted questions in order to give us better understanding if we do want to engage this? I think that was part of the question as well. I'm not sure if Amy would be able to help us.
Yes, the questions that have been submitted responses have been provided. And if it would help, I can pull up the letter that was provided, or the last letter that you all sent, just so that you can see what you've said about Tryon Creek, if you're proposing changing that and providing additional testimony.
Well, at least at the current moment, it seems like the Tryon Creek is the only thing that's been brought up multiple times. Seems to have agreement as as an idea to even have a discussion point. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up, and let's see what we previously said and see if we need to say it again, or if the words that we've already said are enough. All right, and Amy, is the paragraph below the one on screen, does it say anything about the treatment? Okay. Because so far, we've pretty much said that we have not come to a consensus. And if we wanted to make a statement, we would essentially have to come to a consensus essentially in the next 2 weeks and make a statement of that consensus. Or else I honestly, I don't know if it's wise to actually, I don't know if it's wise to go into the rate hearing with this, because I don't know if we have enough or if we're saying extra. Go ahead, Alexis, what are your thoughts?
I'm just wondering, Amy, if you can also show us what we said in the first.
Yes,
budget
I was
letter.
just about to pull that up as
Oh,
well.
great.
I have
Thank you.
that Here.
Should have known you'd be ahead of me.
Mm. I think that maybe it was
Oh, yeah,
on the
just-
list of issues. So there was a letter in the prior year that specifically spoke to Tryon Creek and asked them to look more closely at that. But in this one, because there's been difference of opinion on the board, it was flagged as one that had concern and that you wanted to continue to get information about in this first letter, and then in the second letter kind of re-raised it as that you hadn't reached consensus, but that you wanted to remain engaged on the capital project.
So at this point in the conversation, would it be rushed to actually just do like a poll of the board members to see if they're invested enough in making a statement? Because we haven't really gone into too much detail about the Tryon Creek. We have mentioned it, so it is a point of interest, but we haven't gone into super detail. And I would think that if we wanted to make a statement on it, we would definitely need that detail for a committed statement. And so maybe just like a straw poll of like, do we actually feel committed to making a comment on this? I'll give you a minute, Tom, go ahead.
Sorry. I just wanted to say, if everybody kind of remembers back, BES came and gave us a presentation, and they gave us quite a bit of detail about this. So we have had some detail, and talking about this one particular item or this one detail has happened a little bit in the past. So if we wanted to talk about it now, I think it'd be a good idea. Thanks.
Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, and I missed some of the earlier conversations about this and just timing and coming on the board and things, but yeah, I would just say, I mean, I think the thing that really jumped out at me as I kept digging down on this was I could find a lot of information, but I could not find an explanation of why the city of Portland would transfer, acres and acres of riverfront land, incredibly valuable and incredibly ecologically important land, to Lake Oswego for $1 without seeming any conditions on it. I mean, there are so many different aspects. This is some of the most valuable land we have in the metro region. I mean, riverfront land is from an ecological perspective, from a just value perspective, public access perspective, is kind of off the charts. And I thought it was really shocking that the more I dug, the less I could find, kind of a thing. So I think we really should be asking more questions. I don't think there's a really, maybe we've asked them in the past, but I couldn't find an answer.
if we did make a statement, would Bob or Tom be interested in helping us craft that, just with the general background interest that they've had?
Sorry. Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to help out.
I would as well.
And then, Amy, if you know the answer, how long would our interjection even be? Is it like a 3-minute time point? Is it 5 minutes? How much time would we be filling or would be available for us to say something at this meeting?
I don't have a clear timeline or breakdown of what the rate hearing is. Usually the board is given about 5 minutes, so somewhere in that ballpark.
Go ahead, Lorraine.
Thank you. Where is it? So I have, of course, the camera is off. So my thoughts. I heard Bob said that he did some digging into it. I would definitely like to know more information. And when I say more information, both the why and the why not, because I think we had a presentation.
Lorraine, I think you muted yourself. And you started at
sorry.
you said we had a presentation and then you went quiet.
I'm sorry. Yeah, we had a presentation from the city about the why it should happen. And now I'm hearing about some why nots, why we shouldn't. So I would like for me to be informed with the work that Bob and Tom is proposing to do, is to see those clear whys and why not side by side, to understand, because if I should, sitting here now to say, hey, I know about Tryon Creek and the fact that it's riverfront property and all these kinds of things, that is a really dominant culture thinking about it. It's a valuable river property for all the reasons. I'm not saying good or bad, for all the reasons stated, kind of thing. So I would need to understand a little bit more so that I can make an informed support or not support, if that seems clear. Just throwing out the fact that, I went and I looked through stuff and I couldn't say that is not enough for me. And the reason why I'm saying that is because, and this is not casting aspersion on anything. I'm just telling you all the default in especially when we are talking about conversations in jurisdictions, governmental jurisdictions. One of the tactics that people use to get their own ways, they start talking in that way, whether it is so or not. There's like, oh yeah, I did research, blah, blah, blah. And they come with this confidence based on showing up. So so I would need a lot more information, and I'm not saying it should or shouldn't be sold for $1. But I'd certainly love to have more information about the whys and the why nots.
Robin, if I could just interject for a second, this is Amy. Lorraine, I did just want to flag that when the Bureau has come and presented, there is probably limitations to what can be shared publicly, because this is a complex negotiation going on behind the scenes that the staff and many people have been working on for I don't know how long, probably several years. Farshad Al-Adadi, who did present some information, did make himself available to pub members for one-on-one conversations, so that any questions that you may have whatever he is able to share, he could share with you directly. So that certainly remains available for any board member who hasn't already received information directly from those conversations. Some board members did. I'm not sure who all, but I did want to make you aware that that offer had been made back when they provided information to the board at a prior board meeting.
Thanks, Amy, and I agree, and that's why I'm saying if there's now be a conversation about the why not, that those comparison be brought forward together.
You've got a response, Tom? Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention that I was one of those people that called for Shad. He gave me some information, but he also did not give me some information. He said that some of what I was asking was relative to the leverage that they wanted to have. And of course, in these types of negotiations, there's a lot of behind the scenes type stuff that, as Amy said, and Lorraine, you know, isn't put out there to the public. But I don't have time to share it now, but I did get a lot of information. And the bottom line was that the information I got actually raised more questions about not only the land deal, but other provisions of the agreement. So the thing that stands out to me is the land, but there are also other issues that came out. And just as a reminder of what Farshad did tell us in our public meeting, something to the effect that the old treatment plant needs to be replaced. We're looking at spending, millions of dollars to fix the old plant, et cetera, if we don't go forward with this deal with Lake Oswego, which is fine, but they didn't really get into what the options were, what they looked at, what they could or couldn't have done. They've just told us this is what they want to do. So they didn't give us the whys and the why nots relative to what they presented as well. So when you try to find that out, it's quite a long road and difficult to get information. But to me, what really stood out was here's a city, Lake Oswego, that's willing to buy 12 acres of riverfront property for $1 with all of its burdens and encumbrances, whatever they might be. It will buy it. It's saying, okay, we'll buy it for $1. And then when I called Lake Oswego and said, Lake Oswego, what are you going to do with this land? They said, oh, we're not talking about that now. We're going to have a new process to decide what to do and that type of thing. So who knows exactly what that would be. But what struck me, since I have done negotiations to a certain extent in the past, is that when one offers something and somebody else takes it, you know that the one taking it is definitely got an agenda, and that and it's going to pay for them to take something, in this case, the land, for $1, and Portland's thinking that it's going to give something up. My concern is that we as a city that own this land, not really just BES, it's really city land, City of Portland land, and that it's worth a heck of a lot of money. So the other provisions of this agreement, we are being quite generous in our participation with the other agreements that we've made. So this on top of the other generous Portland agreement items, to me was just I couldn't, it's not that I can't understand it, it's that I believe it's a mistake on the part of the Portland negotiators, that they're giving away valuable land. And I don't know why they put it in there. I guess they felt like maybe they need to sweeten the deal. But I listened in on the City of Lake Oswego's City Council meeting back in December 20th of 2022. And their city manager, their assistant city manager, was bragging about the deal that the City of Lake Oswego was getting from the City of Portland in terms of that particular item was on the purchase of new land, that we're going to contribute 50% to buy the new land that Lake Oswego is going to buy. So not only we're giving them 12 acres for $1, and then we're going to spend, I think BES has it in the budget, $10 million to buy the new land. So anyway, if you really look deep at the details, it starts looking like there could be a better deal struck for the city of Portland. That's what I'm getting at.
Thank you, Tom. And if I could just kind of, I feel like I possibly glue everything together. It sounds like there is definitely an interest in at least making a values statement at the rate hearing about why we question the $1. We don't necessarily say we're absolutely against it. We can just say, hey, there are ecosystem services, there's values to this that we don't quite seem to understand why it was traded for this purpose. We want you to focus on it. So in the essence of moving the conversation forward, it feels like there is interest in at least a value statement. And there's also interest in having possibly Amy send along some of that information that was passed along, just to get it back in our head so that we are a little bit more informed on whatever viewpoint we have. Go ahead, Sarah, before we wrap it up.
Hey everyone, Sarah Messier, Water Bureau staff and ex officio member on Pub. My comments are just to sort of pull us back. Like, we are micro down, super deep. And again, I just want to remind folks that this is going to be the rate hearing. You know, this rate hearing is talking about like that rate increase that both bureaus are proposing. And I know that's what at the last work session, you know, that was what the mayor was asking our representatives from Pub of, like, do you support this? Yes, no. And so I think, like, again, pulling back, you know, thinking about what those rate increases are actually funding and what the bureaus are asking for and what those services are going to be provided by those rate increases, I think should be more of the topic. You know, when we talk about Tryon Creek, my questions come up of what's the actual line item in this fiscal year budget? Has that dollar, you know, transfer actually happened, or are the negotiations still so in the future that, like, it doesn't actually apply to the rates that we're going to be talking about, or that, you know, the bureaus are going to be talking about with the city council in a few weeks? So I understand Tryon Creek is important, yes, and I just want to make sure that we're not co-opting time for that topic and not getting to the actual information that is going to be talked about at that rate hearing at the end of May.
All right. And Sarah, thank you for that. I appreciate bringing us back. We want to be potent when we are coming into these spaces as Pub, and being mindful of what results we can get out of making our voices heard there. Tom, final comment. Go ahead.
So using Sarah's suggestion, then I would suggest that we bring to the attention of City Council that the Tryon Creek agreement, we don't have to get down to the nitty gritty, let's just keep it at the upper level, that we are concerned that the Tryon Creek agreement could be a better agreement in terms of the economic impact to the city of Portland, which affects our rates, which affects what's in the budget. The Tryon Creek project is in the budget in different places, and it's in what we've already looked at. If you look at the detail, and for instance, the city's already spent a few $1 million on this project, BES has. And so anyway, so it's directly related to the rates, and it would be a suggestion on our part that one of the things we could suggest to City Council is to look at the terms of the agreement with the city of Lake Oswego, and that we believe that some of those terms could be looked at more carefully and improved as it relates to the city of Portland side of it, the deal for the city of Portland, whatever way we want to say it. And then,
Okay.
we could include, generally speaking, all of the items on the agreement if those were all looked at. Thank you.
Okay. So at this point, I think we've at least stated our interest in it. I think the best thing that we can do might be to just do a poll to see if we want to invest the time, because we can draft the letter in between then and now, but we do need to move on to our next conversation. And it kind of seems like we're in an in-between place, so it might be best to do a poll. What are your thoughts, Karen and Amy?
Well, my thoughts were, first of all, apologies for coming in late and halfway through this conversation, but I did not think that we were talking about drafting another letter. I thought we were talking about what verbal, additional verbal testimony we would give at the rate hearing. So we're not, I just want to confirm we're not talking about drafting another letter, right?
Sorry, yeah,
Okay.
I may have said that. Drafting whatever needs to be spoken
Sort of
at the rate
talking
hearing.
points or something like that. Okay. Oh gosh, well, from what I followed from the conversation, it sounds like I liked your gluing it together, Robin, with, you know, perhaps some kind of a value statement. And Tom's summary at the end there about how to tie it back to the actual rate hearing content. I think, you know, just as a fellow board member, I think I could get behind that. So Lorraine's, yeah, I just want to, I don't want to lose track of what Lorraine stated about the, what am I trying to say? Just, I don't want to lose track of the being conscious of the, for lack of a better term, the lens we're looking through and how we're evaluating what's a good deal and what's not a good deal. And what we are kind of, so it's sounding to me a bit like it's sort of Portland against Lake Oswego, and I think we're kind of losing track a bit. I mean, that's just what I'm sensing of, you know, we're talking about adequately, not just adequately, you know, treating water so that the environment and public health are protected, and kind of getting into the weeds of the financial wheeling and dealing is, I don't know. It's just, it's a different lens, and it's a very particular lens about how we value things and how we assign dollar values to things. Anyway, I didn't say, Lorraine said it beautifully. I said it very awkwardly, but I just don't want to lose track of that. So, you know, I could get behind if, you know, Bob and Tom wanted to kind of work up a talking point statement that we could review. You know, we have one more meeting before we, you know, need to finalize our decision about what we may or may not say on May 24th. So I could get behind reserving judgment, I guess, until I see what they come up with.
And what I would add to that is I can send back around links to information that has been provided, as well as offers for one-on-one contact. And am happy to speak myself one-on-one with members as well if you have specific questions in preparation for making a decision at the next meeting.
Yeah, so far it kind of sounds like, please forward those links, Amy, and it sounds like if possible, Tom and Bob can kind of formulate some of those talking points, and it might be best just to hear the talking points and then finalize if we want to say something at the next meeting. Is that a good resolution for today?
Yes, I think that makes sense, because you'll want to evaluate whether you know, what you're saying is different from what you've already said in prior communications, and whether it's enough to be present at that meeting. And you'll also have more information about what's in the proposed and potentially some other impacts between now and the next meeting.
All right, beautiful. So in between now and the next meeting, we're gonna need Tom and Bob and possibly Amy to get there, come together, get us those talking points, and we're excited to hear the value statement. And so with that, let's get on. Sarah, go ahead before we go.
Yeah, I just want to remind folks that, you know, at least on the Water Bureau side, the rate increases the Bureau talked about would be supporting RAMP, which is a financial assistance program, would be supporting, you know, apprenticeship program that is hoping to, you know, diversify the staffing and some of our construction crews. So I just want to remind folks that, like, if we're going to be doing a value statement about, like, you know, construction projects or things like that, like, if we want to support financial assistance, if we want to support, you know, workforce development and equity initiatives, this is the time to, you know, reiterate that as well. And I don't want just our values to be, you know, in one lane. I definitely want to touch on, like, all of the things that, you know, we do support as a board.
We did that. That's what Karen and Lorraine gave testimony to at City Council already. Yeah, and it was in our letter that we support those things. So we've already done that. So I don't know why we would need to do that again.
Well, since it's a rate hearing and the bureaus are asking for rate increases, wouldn't we want to, you know, again, highlight the things that that the rate increases would be supporting?
I think it would detract from the message that we're trying to take. If we take this message forward, I think that my take on listening to Lorraine and Karen at City Council was City Council had a couple direct questions about trying to find ways to reduce costs. So they were actually asking for some detail, which you know, Lorraine and Karen couldn't give because, you know, the board hadn't gotten into that kind of detail. So anyway, I am
feeling, Tom, I am having some feelings showing up right now that I just want to acknowledge. That I feel like you're telling me that your thing is important and my thing is not, and it hurts. So this is not an either or. We are in a both and situation. We can talk about multiple things. Okay, so I've said my piece. I know there are other hands up, so I will gladly be happy for other people to join in.
Karen and then Goldan. Karen has froze on my screen. I'm not sure if anyone else is noticing that.
Yeah, I can't hear her either.
So we'll go to Goldan first, and then we'll go to Karen.
I just want to say I was at the work session before, and I did hear the testimony that that we got from Pub, which was great, and just want to say that the rate hearing is about rates, and so it's an opportunity to discuss kind of overall, broadly speaking, programming and ratepayers, and it's not really. I wouldn't say it's a time to get into the weeds. So I think, to Sarah's point, we've spent a lot of time on this one individual interest, and I think it's important to look at to take broader strokes and look at the policy decisions at hand that are impacting rates. So more from the policy making perspective, and so yeah, and I don't know if the co-chair is back, if Karen's back, but I give the floor back to you, Robin.
Yeah, I'm not seeing Karen yet, so go ahead,
Trying to
Bob.
reconnect.
Thanks. I feel like we've taken this down a rabbit hole that I didn't mean to do when I said that I supported bringing it in. When I said that, I thought it would be like kind of a one-liner in a much bigger discussion. I agree. I think the rate hearing needs to be focused on the rates. It's a fairly high level conversation. I think it's an opportunity to get a one-liner in there that really says, you know, this is one place that we are concerned about, that there's potentially an issue here and an opportunity as well. But I think beyond that, in a rate hearing, it's not the right forum. If we want to really pursue it, there's probably another way to do it.
Thank you for that input. Go ahead, Alexis.
Thanks, everyone. This is Alexis Rife, voting member. I want to just plus one what Bob just said. I agree that it makes that we might want to add in a sentence about this, kind of pending what we've already discussed, pending more information. But I also think that it's important that at the rate hearing, we reiterate our support for RAMP and other things that this group does have consensus on, and that even though they were in our letter, they are high priority for us, and we have reiterated them multiple times amongst ourselves. And I think it's important that we take advantage of time in front of council to reiterate that as a public advisory board. Thank you.
Actually, Amy, I'd like to ask, do you think we should kind of pause it here because we do have another part of the discussion, or do you think we don't have enough consensus yet?
Well, I don't know that I've heard consensus, but I don't know that you need that today. If you want to propose something by next meeting, I think that is fine. Karen is also back in the room, so but you know, so far the what has been proposed, you know, can be drafted between now and the next meeting, and we can attempt to incorporate broader value stuff, but it would again be probably restating things that you've said. So, but then you could consider at the next meeting whether you want to take that up at that next meeting.
All right, final comment from Tom, and then we will move on to the next thing.
Oh, thank you, Robin. First, I want to say, Sarah, I'm sorry. I know I do that to people at times, and I don't like doing it. And thanks for catching it and speaking, you know, how you feel. I'm very sorry for hurting you, and anybody else when I say something if I do that. I was a little overwhelmed with the idea that since I was volunteering to write something up, I was overwhelmed with the idea of doing all those other things. So maybe that triggered me to resist. But I'm fine with going with whatever the group decides. I will volunteer to try and write something up and get Bob's and Amy's input, or maybe Bob would like to do it first because he might make it a one-liner easier than I could. But that was the part I was volunteering for. So the other part is something else. Anyway, thank you.
All right, so I'm going to motion that Bob and Tom and possibly Amy come up with some drafted talking points, value statements in mind, possibly a line on Tryon Creek as a focus, and that we will decide at the next meeting if we do want to make a comment on it, or if it's best just left unsaid. So would that need a second, I guess?
I'll go ahead and second that.
All right, and to make it speedy, let's do a vote of acclamation. So all of those in favor, just unmute yourself and say aye.
I think we might, since we made it a formal motion, I think we need to do public comment. If we're going to be formal, we got to be formal all the way. So.
Is there any public comment? All right. And are we still able to do a vote of acclamation though, once the public comment has passed?
I think we could, but I think the old raise hand method works just as speedily, and we get a count, but
Oh, okay. I guess if you're in favor, then please raise your hand in the participant area. All right, I'm seeing almost everyone with that one, so it looks like the yeses have it. Wonderful. Everyone kindly lower your hand. All right. And so with that, we're actually going to start our next topic, where we will be discussing what the government transition is going to be like for us as a board, how we envision ourselves going forward, and just what we can do for recruitment. So with that, I'm going to actually pass it off to Karen, if you're ready.
I'm ready. Thanks for handling all that, Robin. You get to take a break now and participate. Well, anyway, you don't have to facilitate. You can actually participate. So thank you for handling that discussion. So I think we're going to start. Well, let me just take a step back and then turn it over to Goldan, and is Michelle here too? I think maybe, but definitely Goldan for some kind of remarks to get us started. But we are looking at a pretty ground-shaking change that's coming forward to the city of Portland. And PUB as an advisory body is kind of, I don't know, I mean, the analogy, I sort of see us on this kind of wavy ocean, you know, and we're just kind of riding along these waves and troughs. And I think we have perhaps an opportunity to stick with the marine analogy, kind of chart a course, maybe, and at least put forward our opinion as current PUB members about how we think that PUB as an advisory body can be relevant and do good public service in the midst of this transition and ideally after this transition to a new form of city government happens. So what we wanted to sort of kick off the conversation with the board today is a bit of background and a bit of history and context from commissioners' staff. And we thought we would frame our discussion today around, not that this is the only question to be answered, but I think it's one of them, is how do we want to conduct a recruitment for new members on PUB? Because we do have 4 members whose terms are ending at the end of June. And like I've said before, in a different time, you know, in February, March, we would have been putting out a recruitment and a public notice and convening a group of folks to conduct the recruitment and interviews and vetting to make recommendations to the full board and ultimately to the mayor. So, but it's not normal times. So, and yet we have 4 folks that, you know, will be, you know, maybe leaving the board at the end of June. And I think that's a good sort of, I don't know, milestone maybe for us to be thinking about how we want to handle that milestone. So what do we want the board to look like? And I shouldn't say what do we want, but, you know, how do we envision PUB remaining relevant in a very different form of city structure, where we're not advising and providing input to a commissioner anymore. So that all said, I'm going to be quiet for a moment, and I think Goldan, I think is going to kick off and perhaps respond to or clarify or provide some more detail or insights around the summary information that Amy sent out as read ahead a couple weeks ago, last week. So Goldan, do I have that cue right?
Yeah, I actually
Okay.
have Michelle Rodriguez, our senior.
And Michelle is going to
advisor
go.
here
Okay, thank
as
you.
well.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for having Goldan and I here tonight to talk with you about this. First, we kind of wanted to open up the floor. I hope you had an opportunity to read the document that was sent in advance. We wanted to sort of kick it off with Q&A. I know usually Q&A comes after discussion, but because we kind of laid it out as high level as we could in that document, again, with Amy's help and after the conversation with Karen and Robin too, we just wanted to really have an opportunity for a discussion about what is coming, and we will probably not have as many answers as you maybe would like or would settle your hearts and minds.
I don't know about you guys, but I can't hear.
Can folks hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Michelle. I don't know, Tom, maybe if you can't hear us, then this doesn't help, but
Yeah, I can't hear.
huh. Well, I'll send you a chat, Tom, to check your speakers. Or maybe try signing out and signing in again.
Yeah.
If you're having audio issues, try turning your camera off too.
So yeah, thank you, Amy, for pulling that up. So we sent this and we just kind of wanted to open up the discussion. There's a lot coming at us by way of a changing our form of government, as Karen kicked us off and said. And this could mean significant changes for the work of the advisory body programs and the 150 plus advisory bodies that are connected to in some way to the city of Portland's work, and pub being no different in the sense that it is also a part of the multitude of advisory bodies. There's potential and opportunity, and that's the place we want to kind of rest in, that potential and opportunity, but we also understand that there may be a lot of questions or concerns. And so I wondered if folks had an opportunity to read this, if anybody had questions to kick off the conversation for us tonight.
Well, I will start with a question while people are ruminating on that. It's not necessarily directly related to the write-up, but I think it would fit under the commissioner's recommendation. One of the, just a couple sentences of background, one of the issues that came up actually during our budget discussions about, let's say, concerns around the bureaus kind of moving too fast on transitioning and kind of doing a lot of planning and setting things in stone and that sort of thing without, and again, Lorraine spoke to this at the first budget hearing presentation, without what we had seen anyway as a lot of public input. I mean, other than the vote that the residents of Portland cast. So to my question, Michelle, would be how much, if any, public input has informed the commissioner's recommendation and options on how we pub might want to move forward, conducting a recruitment, identifying priorities. What's the commissioner hearing from the public about how they want the bureaus and the advisory bodies to respond to this transition?
Well, I would say the answer is a simple one. You guys are the public and the people who would have an opinion about this body. of all of the emails Commissioner Maps has gotten about the transition form of government, I would venture to say we have gotten 0 about advisory bodies in general. It is not on people's minds. And frankly, it wasn't really on the minds of a lot of the leadership who were discussing the transition until Commissioner Maps brought it up and said, hey, what are your guys' plans? And can you help us understand where the directions are going? And as late as, or maybe this was, late last week, I can't, all the days are meshing together. We got an email update. I think Amy was privy to this email too, from the advisory body program out of Civic Life, saying they were going to sunset a bunch of advisory bodies. And we've been given, I have no understanding of what that means, or which are being sunsetted, or what scoping they're using to sunset them. We often are getting information at the same time you guys are, sadly, in these discussions. So I know that's not probably a satisfactory answer, Karen, but it's an honest one.
Honest is better than satisfactory.
Yeah.
Looks like Alexis has a question.
Yeah, to build off of that, and maybe you're already answering it, Michelle, is I was curious what other advisory bodies are kind of doing in this space and what sort of guidance they are getting. And I'm almost wondering, well, you just said that there are hundreds of advisory bodies across the city, but I'm wondering almost about an opportunity for advisory bodies to kind of come together and discuss this. So I guess it's less of a question and more of just a rumination on this, but if you have any insight into other advisory bodies and how they are tackling this and how they are thinking about it, I'd welcome more information.
Yeah, a little bit of benefit that you get from me is that I used to be the manager overseeing this program when I worked at Civic Life. So I have a little bit of history of the program. And it's probably why I get all the feels when people start talking about disappearing advisory bodies, because I saw the program in its inception. The notion was, or at least the really high level mission and values that the program was attempting to create when it was started at Civic Life a few years ago, was we had all of these sort of disparate groups doing things, sometimes staff by staff, sometimes not, but people who were committing time and energy to show up and engage in their local government. And that's a big deal. It's a big deal for all of you to sit in these meetings every couple of weeks, to spend your time, to opine, to engage council, to testify, all of those, to write letters, like all of that's really important work. And there wasn't there weren't guardrails around that work. The only advisory bodies that really had guardrails were ones that were created for the back. And I would even say, I'd venture to say, and even some backs were treated differently at different bureaus, but the sense was that they were supposed to be budget advisory committees, helping the bureaus look at their budgets on an annual basis, providing public input. But other than the backs, everything was kind of, there's a bicycle one, there's the Sustainability and Planning Commission that just got separated out, there's the Freight Committee, there's like the span of things. PPB, the Police Bureau and PBOT, I think, have the most per bureau, over a dozen each, I think. But spanning any kind of topic that you might be interested related to the city of Portland, there's probably an advisory body for it. And so if you think about over 150 bodies, each having 12 to 20 members, it's a lot of people volunteering their time to engage with the city of Portland. And we discovered at that time that there was no legal training. There was no volunteer training. It was just like, come to the meetings and just like take on this role. And people didn't understand what it was their responsibility. For example, the city has human resource administrative rules like HR 2.02 about harassment and racial discrimination and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And folks hadn't been trained that if in the context of your serving on a volunteer panel for the city of Portland, you did any of these things, you could be kicked off those committees. People didn't know that either, right? Weren't trained any of that. So the advisory body program was attempting to kind of codify a broader, use guardrails again, but broader guardrails to help people understand what their role was. And then also so that we could cross-pollinate the work, that we could ensure that people weren't sitting on 15 different committees and really usurping the time, the access that one gets on being a committee by being on all of the committees, because there were a few people who wanted to be on everything. And so we wanted to do that. We wanted to recruit people sort of in the same way that the city does job recruitment and make people feel a bigger part of the city. So that's kind of where it started, and it had high hopes and dreams. We had a city attorney at that time who was really into the work and was really dedicated to making it come to fruition, who was working with Civic Life. It also, I think we also just weren't meeting some state legal things. And so we were trying to clean up all of that as well. I can't remember precisely all of those details, but I think it had to do with some of those trainings that I mentioned, the HR trainings. So all that being said, that was like 4 or 5 years ago now. It's been a minute since I was in that role. The program, when the most recent staff person before the current person left the program, it kind of was on hiatus for almost a year during all of the challenges that Civic Life faced, that many of you probably read about publicly. And then a new person came in and has only been there, I want to say like maybe 6 months. So I haven't seen anything take shape, but if I were OMF and Mike Jordan, I would be talking to that organization, to that bureau, and to that staff and saying, tell me everything you know, and how best can we bring this work together. And I would say, I'm not sure, other than the most recent email that we received saying that they're going to sunset a bunch of advisory bodies, I have no idea how the mayor or OMF had planned on engaging the general public about the role of advisory bodies, but frankly about the role of the transition in general. That's a different discussion, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole. To this topic, it's partly why I think Commissioner Maps was so convinced early on when Goldan and I met with Karen and Robin, and maybe we didn't do the best job of articulating it, but one of the things that I think Commissioner Maps was really passionate about was Pub having a role, because he didn't want to see this work disappeared. Like he almost had premonition, which like we just saw this email, right, with the sunsetting of advisory bodies. But I feel like he was just like, if that notion says if you don't come to the table, you're going to be served for dinner or whatever, served for lunch, I don't know, whatever that saying is. I think he really felt like if we don't engage the work ourselves, somebody else around us will be telling us what the work will be, or that there won't be work, and they'll just be like, oh, well, you served your purpose, thanks, bye. And we didn't want that. Like our office absolutely didn't want that. And so we wanted to talk through what some options may be. And these were some of the things that we had talked with Karen and Robin, like we could just do status quo, and the pub could just continue looking at the budget for the next budget cycle beyond the one we're currently in now. There will be 2 more budget cycles that you guys could look at technically before a new council comes in, although one of them will hit right as the election is happening, because you recall November will be the election, new commissioners will be in January. So you could just do that. I personally worry that if the status quo is chosen, but let me caveat that you guys spend a whole bunch of your time, and I am not attempting to say you should do something different, because I don't value that, but more I worry that if that is the only focus, that the swirling around us will sort of manifest in a way that isn't really a positive impact on the work that Pub has done, or Pub's loses its relevance because the swirling around us is just, there's so many voices in the room screaming they're not going to hear your opinions, right? Or they're not going to ask for them, or whatever could happen. So the status quo could be it could be a focus on the transition of the work around the utility bureau. So we're having the public works service area discussions. We've had 2 now formalized discussions where Commissioner Maps has brought in bureau directors, deputy directors, and whoever there, I think it was 2 assigned subject matter experts into a room where everybody was sitting there, PBOT, BS, and water, to talk about what a public works service area could mean, because those are the discussions that are ongoing, and we've now had 2 in the course of 2 weeks, and really just sort of setting the stage now for how we do the work. There is no decisions been made, to be clear. So there could be a role that it could be just about envisioning what the future of pub might be in the context of a public works service area. So I'm not saying take on PBET. I'm just saying if we have a public works, if there are so many possibilities, but fleshing out one of them, if the public service work area actually turns into a public works department, which Portland had in 1952, if that happens, where does the pub fit into that? I don't know the answer to that. And the pub could help define what that could be. Or it could
Michelle, can I jump in whenever you're.
Yeah, let me just finish it. And then finally, it could be, what is the future of the advisory bodies as a whole? And maybe that's something that you guys are passionate about and want to look at and opine on and give feedback to OMF on or something like that. So that's kind of what we thought were possibilities. We're also open to hearing others if folks had others. I don't suspect you want to take on multiple bullet points because it's so much work already, what you guys are covering now. But that's sort of that was our thinking on it, and a little bit, hopefully a little bit more context as to how we arrived there. Goldan.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to highlight too, in terms of advice, and I think to your question, Alexis, as well as I think Karen, advisory bodies as a whole, from my knowledge, from the conversations that I've had with OMF, who is tasked with creating a lot of the metrics and outline of what our I'm sorry, thank you, Amy, Office of Management and Finance. So Office of Management and Finance, those are the people who are laying the groundwork for a lot of the implementation of charter reform and the creation of the new government. And the feedback that I've gotten from them is that, well, one, I think that advisory bodies are lower on the priority list, not because they're not important, but they're decentralized. A lot of them don't fall into, a lot of them are at the will of bureaus, and there are so many of them, I think like 150 or more. And so, it's not really the top of the priority list, as far as my understanding. The things that they've hypothetically discussed are, rather than having all of these disparate groups, it would likely become something of a committee, right? So to Michelle's comment, like a public works committee, or it could be around the outcomes, affordability committee, but that might be a consolidation of affordability of not only, water and sewer rates, but other, like, how much you're paying to park your car in the public right of way. So ensuring that the things that we're charging Portlanders for every day are around the outcomes that we want. So to make sure that those services are affordable. But that's probably, those things aren't going to be solidified probably, for a while. In terms of what has happened with civic life and what the information we've received from that, there was mention of wanting to look at pub's study around payment. I know you all were involved in the pilot program of what that would look like to do payment. And I suspect, this is just my opinion from what I've gathered, it's probably a formalization of advisory bodies and committees, because that's something that hasn't been centralized historically in the city. It's kind of at your own will. There's no concrete core city policies. So rather that whether that's like Michelle said, what kind of introduction you get to into the city, if you have orientation, if you're paid, et cetera, et cetera. So that's my personal opinion. I'm not you know, like Michelle said, we're receiving a lot of information in real time as well and trying to get upstream in order to have time to think and talk about it. And I want to turn it back over to the floor for any additional questions you all have.
I thought I saw Lorraine. Yeah, Lorraine's hand was up.
Thanks, Karen. Let me lower my hand so I wouldn't forget. So my question is, in this whole conversation about, you know, with the new governance and all of that, is what are the things that are going to change, which is the new governance, and what are the things that are not? And let me see if I can explain what's happening, what's in my head here, so that you all can get a picture of it. So I am thinking that there's a whole body of work that was done before this new governmental structure is going to come into being in 2024. So does that mean, and I know it doesn't, but I'm going to ask the question, does that mean we are starting new with everything? Right? So everything that's gone before is no longer going to be, and now it's from 2024 going forward, right? So that is the overarching question, which I know cannot be true, because then, you know, so many things would have to change. So, but in that context, what are the things that are going to stay the same or going to continue? And what are the things that are subject to change? And I know we're saying somewhat that boards and bodies, committees are somewhat subjected to some kind of change, but I'm just curious about the boards and committees that are not subject to that change, and what are the what would determine those that are not subject to that change? That's a lot of words just to say the last part, which is what I wanted to see.
Lorraine, I would say we don't actually know what's going to change and what's not going to change, or what's subject to change or what's not subject to change. I think this is like the worst version of riding a bicycle while building it at the same time.
And that work's going to involve reading code and reading administrative rules. And so that's what the Office of Management and Finance, from my understanding when I last checked in March, is doing, starting to look at what are the documents, what are the directions of the charter, of the council, and the purpose of the advisory bodies. So it's dependent upon how it was created and the directions given to that are written down. So it's something that they're going to have to go through and do kind of an audit on.
Who is they? I'm sorry.
The Office of Management and Finance, I think. I mean, the people who we are currently in the process of, and maybe this, I think I'm starting to understand, maybe there is room for more education around the charter reform process or the new governance structure process. So we have the people who are doing the work and in the Office of Management and Finance, whose job every day is to be convening people and to be working on restructuring government. And then we also have, so like, for example, Public Works, we're working with our bureaus and Commissioner Mapps's portfolio for the Bureau of Transportation, the Water Bureau, and for the Bureau of Environmental Services. We have to submit a budget by the fall. And so we also have to work together to kind of audit our bureaus. And I don't know that we're not looking at just advisory bodies, but we're looking at the structure of our bureaus as a whole. And those are the meetings that Michelle was referring to, the two, I think, or three that have already happened that our office is involved in.
So to be continued, this conversation and questions. perhaps one thing that might be helpful for us as board members is, and I can say this would be helpful for me, is to take a good read of the code that currently governs pub. And it may be a good exercise for us is to kind of go through that and really in some sense ask Lorraine's question, you know, under the way that pub is currently, the governing document of pub, the city code that governs pub, what would need to change? You know, what is clearly outdated or not outdated now, but you know, what will be clearly outdated on January 1st, 2025. And that might almost be our sort of minimum of what needs to change, right? I mean, if pub is going to continue, you know, the code that refers to what pub is and what its purpose is and how it's governed, and who it reports to and all those things, you know, that's kind of our minimum. I'm just throwing that out there as something that we all might want to spend some time with before we continue this conversation. Did you, Michelle, comment on that or anything else as we wrap up here?
Oh, yeah, no, I think what, being conscientious of time, I think what we would love to hear too is just from folks more in general, if there's a sense of what direction pub would want to go in. So I realized that because the first topic area took longer than I think we anticipated, we didn't really get a chance to really get to this point, even of a straw poll of trying to understand folks, because there's a couple of things that are part of this, which of course is determining that work, and then the recruitment and the staff person. Once Eliza left, we, you know, there's recruitment for staff as well as recruitment for more board members, but the recruitment for more board members also needs staff. But if there's a smaller scope that the board is going to go on, different things would happen, right? So I guess I'm not suggesting that you do this now unless folks wanted to, but that is the more pertinent and more time sensitive information that we would like to have or appreciate knowing. And to your point, Karen, I think going through code is super great, because in fact, that is what OMF is doing in other ways. When something says, you know, like the pub serves at the pleasure of the mayor and the commissioner, that will itself have to be changed, right? Because it's not going to work in the same way with 12 new geographically based council members, et cetera. So I think that it would be great to hear if there was already folks' feelings in a certain direction, or if that's something that you want to discuss at your next pub meeting, or people need more information, to Amy's point in the chat, to get there.
Yeah, thanks for that, Michelle. I mean, I agree, or I think that is the more meaningful part of, I'm hearing you say that's the feedback that the commissioner's office would like to have. And I also feel that that's the more meaningful conversation for us all to have. But I just thought the code exercise might be sort of a door in, something kind of a small assignment, something easy for us to start with, because yeah, the bigger questions are they need to be grappled with, but I do think that we will close for today. But I do think that's a great place for us to pick up on May 18th. And that looking at the second bullet that Amy has on the slide there, the scope of work for the next 6 months, I think, again, I always find it easier to respond to something that's there than sort of envision something wholly new. So if we look at our work plan from last year, what we've accomplished, what we've left, the next group of pub folks, might pick up and continue with, Let's have a conversation on May 18th about what's the meaningful work that we want to see continued by whatever pub looks like. And what is new work perhaps, or a new scope that we recommend, right, as folks, and thanks for the reminder that we are the public. As folks sitting in these seats now, what do we see as meaningful work that pub could take on, perhaps new work, since we have really fulfilled the charge that was set out for us in 2015. What new challenges and how can we meaningfully contribute in a different and perhaps more expansive way than we have for the past 7 or 8 years. Yeah, so that's where I would recommend we kind of put some thought into, look at our scope of work from last year, think about what we'd like to see pub do in the next year and a half, and we'll sort of frame that in a way that we could respond back to Michelle and Goldan with something a little bit more specific than what we were able to offer today. Any other thoughts or suggestions for how to move this conversation forward at the 18th? Thumb up or two. And I do think also to Michelle's point, we really do need to make some decisions about how we want to handle recruitment, or asking folks to, if they're willing to continue for 6 more months, to extend their terms for 6 months. I think that needs to be a component of our conversation next week too, or so not next week, sorry, next meeting. Any other suggestions for what we might want? Oh, and also at May 18th, we're going to need to make a final decision about what we want to do about presentation at the rate hearing. And yeah, anyway, as usual, we have quite a lot for an hour and a half. So I don't know, maybe we can make a collective pact with each other that we're gonna take 15 minutes to make a decision about talking points at the rate hearing, and then move on. But what have you got, Tom?
I just wanted to mention again your suggestion for everybody to read the code. I think that's a really good idea for all of us to read the code and see exactly what it says. That's it.
Cool. All right. Anything else, Amy? Any announcements from staff or anything before we close?
No, I did not have anything just open for group announcements. Otherwise, we can conclude.
Tom, is that a hand for an announcement, or is that a residual hand?
That's residual.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. In that case, let's adjourn our meeting. Have a fine evening, everyone.